Hi everyone, Fox is here, and I'm bringing you my review of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. As I mentioned many times before, Robin Hobb has been on my TBR list for the authors that I have to read for God knows how long. This book was written in 1995, and pretty much ever since it came out, I wanted to read it, but I did not. And there is a reason for that I discussed in my book reading anxiety video. I don't want to talk about it anymore here, but I just wanted to say that I was so apprehensive about reading this book just because I felt as if once I read it, I will not have anything else to read. Yeah, I know it's very silly, but let's just skip it and jump right into the review. This is a high fantasy novel. This is book number 1 in the Farceur Trilogy, and I had very high expectations because everyone was recommending Robin Hobb to me as someone who is very close in style and writing to my favorite author, which is Lynn Llewellyn and her The Night Runner series. And I did enjoy this book, but what surprised me in this book, first of all, was how misleading the summary on the back was. I just want to read it to you so that you know there are no spoilers here, really. It's just like, what is this book about? The kingdom of the Sixth Duchess is on the brink of civil war when news breaks that the crown prince has fathered a bastard son and is shamed into abdication. The child's name is Fitz and he is despised. Raised in the castle stables, only the company of king's fool, the ragged children of the lower city, and his unusual affinity with animals provide Fitz with any comfort. To be useful to the crown, Fitz is trained as an assassin and to use the traditional magic of the Farceur family. But his tutor, allied to another political faction, is determined to discredit and even kill him. Fitz must survive, for he may be destined to save the kingdom. I read the summary, and to be completely honest, it kind of confused me. First of all, the first beginning of the book is really slow, and I really appreciate it because it gave us a very rich background setting for Fitz and how he was growing up. But at the same time, when I read the summary, I had an impression as if Fitz meets the fool, the king's fool, right off the bat, and they become friends, which is not the case for this book. And second, is that he is basically raised by the fool. I don't know why I had this impression of this book, but it's also not the case. And when it said that he is raised in the stables and also he is trained to become an assassin, I also assumed that it's going to be one and the same person, but it's not. I honestly, to God, there are so many misleading things in the summary. I don't know why, maybe it's just me, but I expected something else, and I did not expect this book to be so slow paced at the beginning. Like I said before, I do appreciate the fact that Robin Hobb took her time to write a very rich background story for the character, and we get to know him, and we get to know him both as a child, and we see how his skills develop and how he learns things and everything, basically everything. I really enjoyed it. You know what? It was one of those books that when you start reading, you realize from the very first page that you're going to enjoy it. It was very slow paced at first, and I did appreciate it because sometimes books start really, really fast and then they slow down, which is a bit more disappointing compared to a book which starts slow but then builds up the pace. And the second half of the book, pretty much when I hit about halfway through, or maybe 1/3, it became so fast paced, and some other stuff started to happen. I also assumed that whatever magic powers the Fitz had were one and the same thing with the Farceur magic, but it's not, and it's very, very interesting. The whole thing, that division that they have in the magic system between the skill, which is the Farceur magic, and that's the magic which belongs only to the kings, and the wit, which is that unusual affinity to animals and their minds and the way that Fitz learns how to control it. It's super different. It's very interesting how they have this division, and essentially one type of magic is praised and is sought for and is sort of this elite thing that everyone wants to have. And the second thing, the second type of magic is basically a witchcraft, which is nobody wants to hear about or know about. And I like how Fitz as a child, when he's only, learning the ropes of living in a castle, and he's only learning things about himself, and he does not really have any memories of anything beyond that. It's very interesting how he basically goes through all of those stages about how he learns to hide some parts of himself, about how he learns about betrayals, about he learns about, how people can misrepresent themselves, how people can lie, and how people can deceive you. This is very interesting. This is sort of almost like coming of age type of story, because he starts as a 5 or 6 years old, and then he grows into a young man, and it's like more like a teenager, and it's lovely. The language is absolutely lovely. This book is very well written, both in terms of the magic system, both in the terms of the kingdom, of everything that is happening there. We get a very rich world. We have a lot of characters, which is another thing which I really appreciate in fantasy books. We get a lot of intrigue, and we get a lot of characters. And one of the characters, the guy, I think I should pronounce his name as Burrich, but I'm not sure. I actually quite curious about how to pronounce names in this series. So if any of you knows, maybe there is a link to whatever vocabulary or how to pronounce those names, because honestly, I just blank out on most of them. So when this guy is raising Fitz, he obviously takes care of the boy, even though this boy is some sort of burden for him. But at the same time, he really, really cares about the boy, and he treats him fairly. But at the same time, he does a couple of things that Fitz as a child perceives as a sort of betrayal. And there are some other things that Burrich kind of expects from Fitz that Fitz cannot really promise him, and it creates a rift between them. And you know what? This sort of complicated relationship with a parent figure, it was so well done. I really enjoyed it, because I like how there is a more than just two-dimensional aspects to the characters, and they're not all black or white. They're not all good or bad. And there were some other characters in the story that were not as good as they seemed, or not as bad as they seemed, or they had to make some decisions that were not as good. You know what? It was really, really rich in. This is definitely a character-driven book, and there are a lot of characters I just enjoyed reading about all of them. I cannot really say I hated any of them just because they were poorly written. Some of them I hated just because they were so magnificently written that I wanted to hate them just because they were such bad villains. Actually, I liked how there are no, black or white stuff in this book, but at the same time, it's really enjoyable. There are a lot of aspects to everyday life which is described with very high precision and a lot of details about how he learns how to tend after horses, falcons, dogs, and there are some other aspects to court life as well. And when Fitz starts his training as an assassin, there is that interesting aspect about how he sort of understands that killing is bad, and he doesn't want to kill people. He doesn't want to be a murderer, but at the same time, he understands his role and he enjoys learning new things, but he's also terrified of crossing that line. And I found that really, really interesting, because very often, especially in YA literature, and this is not a YA, this is high fantasy adult fiction, but very often in YA we see protagonists that very easily cross the line between good and bad, and they commit crimes in the name of good, which I understand that it's a character plot twist thing, but at the same time, you cannot just take a very good person who has never done anything bad in their lives and be thrust into a situation and expect them to literally pick up a gun or a sword and just go their thing, save the world by killing other people. And this is a very typical thing in YA, while for whatever reason teenagers seem not to have this, line in their heads about how it's bad, or they do not really feel uncomfortable. I really enjoyed this aspect of Fitz because he is very similar to a stray animal who gravitates to people who are kind to him. And when one of his teachers is kind to him, he sort of, feels bad and he doesn't want to let him down and he wants to do this thing, but at the same time, he doesn't want to do this thing because it means killing. And there is some task that he has to accomplish. And there are some things, and there is sort of a task that he has to do. And I really like how there is a conflict, and there is that not only, external, but also internal conflict in the Fitz. And I really enjoyed it, even though at times the book was really slow paced. I enjoyed it for what it is, for the complexity of the plot, from the complexity of the characters, and the richness of the world itself. I did enjoy it, and when I got to the very end, there were some really crazy stuff that started to happen. I was like, what? What? Seriously, why why did you have to wait till, I don't know, 80% of the book for the shit to go down? Huh? Oh my god. And there were there were a couple of deaths in this book that I really regret. I'm not going to say which one of them are the ones that I regret, but I just want to say that if you read this book, there is just one human death and one animal death, both of which that happen at the very end of the book, and I felt so sad about both of them. What I really liked about this book and the writing style is that Robin Hobb does not make absolutely everything crystal clear. This is not just she goes and says, hey, this guy is a villain and this is a good guy, and that's because that. No, you actually have to read about characters and see what the actions are, what they do, what they say, and then come to conclusions. And there are some things in the book that at the very end, I was reading, and then I was like, wait, what? And then I had to go back a couple of pages and read it again to make sure that I actually got that, small reference. And at some point, I was like, what? How? And I'm so excited about this book. The only thing that I did not like was a bit of slowness to the pace at the very beginning, and it had nothing to do with the slow pace itself, because when the book as rich and as detailed and as magnificently written as this one, I do appreciate a slow pace because it takes time to actually, have everything settle down and have the world flesh out in your mind, and I really enjoy it. What I did not like, and that's the only reason why I gave this book 4 stars, that's a very solid 4-star book for me, I did not particularly like reading books about very young children. There is that age limit that, let's just say, when the book is about a teenager or whatever, it's fine with me. But if the book starts with someone who's as young as Fitz was at the very beginning, it just doesn't work for me. For whatever reason, I do read middle grade and I do read young adult books, but this is an adult book. And when it starts with someone who's 5 years old, I cannot really connect with the character. It's very difficult for me. And when I see the actions of adults and they make perfect sense in my head, they do not make sense to young Fitz because he's too young to understand why this is happening or why this is done the way it's done. And because of that, I know that it brings, it makes things more real. At the same time, it was a bit difficult for me to connect with a character. Just because of that, I gave the book 4 stars, since otherwise it would have been 5-star read for sure. Just talking about this book makes me really excited. I feel as if this book would be a very good thing to listen to as an audiobook if there is a very good narrator, but I I'm really excited to continue with the series. I am pathetically behind on the read along, but hopefully I will be able to read books number 2 and 3 in the month or two. One of the characters that I'm really interested in is the Fool. He is a very curious and peculiar character, and the first time when he appeared in the novel, that was such a misleading appearance. I was like, oh my god, how can that be the character that I would be interested in? And then boom, and I was like, this was all I could think of, like who he was and what he was. And I have a feeling that he might be one of those fairy folk people that would make probably a total perfect sense, because everything that happened and the way his room looks like and everything, and I cannot wait to see how his relationship with Fitz develops in the further books, because I heard a lot of things about it and how they like become close friends and everything. And I really cannot read, like I just want to read next book, and I have a booktubeathon to participate in, and I just want to read the second book. This is a gorgeous paperback edition. This is a UK edition that I got, I believe, from Book Depository. I saw this editions on Sam's channel. Obviously, I had to get the same ones because this is so beautiful. This is honestly one of the most beautiful books that I own, and I really like it. The only problem with this edition is, for whatever reason, the font, and I mentioned it more than once, it's so teeny tiny that it was hurting my eyes to read it. I have to hold book like this to read it. This is not normal. This is way too close, and I'm short-sighted, so it's not a big deal, but at the same time it was very uncomfortable for my eyes to read this book, so I wasn't really making much progress while reading, just because since there is a lot of text on the page, it's like really dense, but at the same time there are less than 400 pages here. Then I got book number 2, and look at this book. It's the same cover, but it's such a different format. It's really ridiculous. Look at those books. I know that they're pretty. This is a very pretty cover, but just because the font is bigger, it's like over 600 pages. And I really cannot wait to read this book. I'm really looking forward to it. I just wish that this book would match the rest of the books that I have. And this is such a small, I know it's almost like a mass paperback edition, but it's not. It's bigger than mass paperback, but at the same time, it's smaller than this one. I have no idea why. So the conclusion, I love this book. 4 stars, really enjoyed it. I hope that I will be able at least somewhat catch up with the read along, because I feel really bad. I'm so glad that I finally read this book. I know I've been waiting for a very long time to read it, and it was totally worth it. Gorgeous edition, very well written. I cannot praise it highly enough. I just wish it was a bit slightly more fast paced, and then it would have been just like 5-star read for me. I would say that probably like the first half was 4 stars and the second half was 5 stars, but I mean, you can give only one rating to a book, so it's 4 stars. Really enjoyed it, and thank you so much, Samantha, for organizing Hobb-a-long read-along, which finally inspired me to start reading the series. Cannot wait to read book number 2. This is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below if you read this book, if you are participating in the read-along. Obviously, do not spoil me anything from other books that I have not read yet, but I'm so excited about the series. Finally making this review video. I just talking about this book got me all excited about high fantasy again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye! Hi everyone, Fox is here, and this is the 3rd video I'm filming today, and I'm dying. Okay. It's not the Assassin's Apprentice, it's just Assassin's Apprentice, Fox. Which means that there's always a room for either a misinterpretation. I do not particularly... And that was a plane, which I could not see, but I could hear. And I just saw the plane.